Part 62. A Middle School Cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 613. Since Makoto Takahashi finished his comic book One Punch Man serialized in the weekly magazine, he did not hand over some of the completed comic manuscripts to the editor-in-chief Yoshida to submit to the serialization meeting as he did before. Instead, he began to accumulate comic manuscripts like animals storing food for the winter, and this also means that the editor-in-chief Yoshida has reduced the frequency of coming to Makoto Takahashi. Although he has avoided being ridiculed and teased by a certain middle school cartoonist, but for the editor-in-chief Yoshida of the weekly magazine, this is not something worth celebrating. Colleagues on the weekly editorial side secretly spread that the reason why Hao Winkuma, who was once praised as the evil manga artist in the weekly Shonen Jump for a long time, has not started a new comic series for a long time is because he has run out of ideas and can't think of new plots or draw new comics. Let me tell you, Chen is drawing a very interesting comic. It's not that he has run out of ideas, but Chen has very high requirements for the quality of comics. As far as I know, the comic draft of the first chapter of that comic has been redrawn no less than 5 times. Do you know the famous genius girl painter Mashiro? That genius girl, now I am helping Chen to complete the new comic as an assistant. Humph. So you short-sighted people can imagine that the comic that Chen is about to serialize will dominate the weekly with a crushing attitude. In the beginning, Yoshida would be unhappy about these rumors, and then he would use his unparalleled eloquence of poisonous tongue to refute them. However, as time passed, 1 month, 2 months, and now it has been almost 3 months, Takahashi Makoto still has no plans to serialize a new comic, and the editor-in-chief Yoshida can no longer refute the rumors among his colleagues as before. To be honest, if he hadn't accidentally witnessed the comic manuscript privately saved by a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, and if a certain Chuyuni cartoonist had repeatedly requested Yoshida not to disclose any news about the new serialized comic in advance, maybe Yoshida, like his colleagues on the weekly editorial side, would doubt whether Takahashi Makoto still has the ability to construct a new plot and complete a new comic. This is not scientific at all. Since Takahashi Makoto's comics in the weekly magazine were finished, Yoshida didn't know how many times he had repeated the sentence in such a resentful tone. According to Yoshida's understanding of a certain Chuyuni manga artist, after completing the content of a new comic manuscript, Takahashi Makoto likes to show off in the first place. Remember when the comic One Punch Man was completed, after part of the comic manuscript was completed, it was the kind of storyboard that was not as good as the ordinary cartoonists, full of magic and even distorted in style original version. Didn't the Chuyuni manga artist still show off in a very proud way, inviting several cartoonists who were familiar with him and friendly to him? But it was Takahashi Makoto who liked to show off in Yoshida's memory. This time, he was able to not disclose any matters related to the new comics for a full 3 months. Not to mention the Chuyuni manga artist's ability to keep secrets. Speaking of Takahashi Makoto, he actually has such a strong tolerance. He didn't help showing off to others. This is really not scientific at all. Even Yoshida began to doubt that this middle school cartoonist who was drawing comics at home was a fake Phoenix Court murderer. For some unreasonable, unscientific, and even inhumane behaviors, humans may not be able to accept them at the beginning, but as time goes by, humans will gradually get used to those behaviors and no longer resist them as before. To exaggerate, they may even become dependent on them and become unable to live normally without such habits. The theory may be a little obscure or even difficult to understand, but if you give an example, it is almost similar to the principle of taming, training, cats and dogs, as well as men and women. From this point alone, humans are indeed a very strange creature, or existence. Of course, making humans accept certain behaviors, even turning them from habits into dependence, this kind of crazy practice is definitely worse than Pavlov's dog saliva fanatic collector. This behavior is essentially the same as some unspeakable drugs, which are potentially addictive, that is, Once humans get involved and become dependent, they can no longer easily get out of it. Just like Yoshida, the editor-in-chief of a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, after getting used to being tricked by a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, he gradually developed a kind of dependence that I feel uncomfortable if I am not ridiculed and teased today. Tisk tisk tisk. It seems that every sadist has a sadist heart. This is not just an urban legend, but a naked reality. Compared to Yoshida, the editor-in-chief who pretends to be confident on the surface but is already extremely anxious in his heart, Takahashi Makoto's life is very easy, after all, compared to the need to serialize multiple comics at the same time before. Now he only needs to concentrate all his energy and complete a comic seriously. Although the quality requirements for comic manuscripts are a bit, they should be very strict. White coat, why is King Arthur a woman? Mashiro girl, in this world where everything can be feminized, feminizing a mere legendary King Arthur, shouldn't it be a natural choice? In response to Mashiro girl's doubts, Takahashi Makoto pretended to be a matter of course. What's more, the leader of Britain now is not the Black Prince's father, White Curly, but the real queen. To some extent, this can also be regarded as leaving the possibility of superfusion for the two-dimensional world and the three-dimensional world. Oh, I see. After the doubts were answered, Mashiro girl lowered her head and continued to draw. However, after working for just a moment, the girl Mashiro looked up again and asked, "Then why don't you make all the characters feminine?" "All feminine? Oh. Girl, you have a lot of ideas. Learn from me how to conquer the world and play with humans." After hearing Mashiro's creative proposal, Takahashi Makoto paused and thought for a moment, and a pleasant smile appeared on his face. "I've decided. After this comic is serialized, I will start to draw all feminine fan fiction." White coat, you haven't answered my question yet. It seems that Mashiro is unexpectedly persistent in some aspects. How should I put it? Although Takahashi Makoto looked very conflicted, he quickly answered Mashiro's question. If all the characters in the comics are feminized, not to mention the time it takes to modify the plot, it will make the weekly editors and my cats all mad. More importantly, Mashiro, nowadays is an era that values looks and appearance. In an era that values appearance, the innocent Mashiro said she couldn't understand. Since the comics revolve around the Holy Grail War, it will inevitably be accompanied by the death of the characters. Takahashi Makoto put on a compassionate expression and said with a slightly melancholy tone, "If all the characters are feminized, feminization, in comics, there will naturally be female characters with various attributes and cute points, and then, it seems a bit too cruel to kill these female characters." Listening to Takahashi Makoto's reluctant tone, Uncle Ding Ding, who was also drawing comics, and the boy Kota, who was helping Mashiro to post the grid, twitched their mouths in an unusually synchronous manner. In the comic Rebellion, you let Lelich shoot Euphemia directly and very surely with his own hands. In the comic Madoka, you killed the senior sister very cruelly, played with Sayaka, and dragged Kyoko into hell. You who drew these comics now actually said that you can't kill people because of their appearance. Takahashi Makoto, you really dare to say that? Speaking of which, Mashiro-chan, you have a servant named Kota who you can play with at any time. I really envy you. After answering Mashiro-chan's question, Takahashi Makoto suddenly changed the subject for no apparent reason. "My cats haven't appeared recently, so I can't get any pleasure at all. Task, I'm unhappy. Kota is mine," like a little lion declaring its sovereignty over food. Mashiro-chan hugged Kota-chan's arm and stared at Takahashi Makoto seriously. "I can't lend it to you, the white coat." "Eh? Why did you suddenly change the subject to me?" Kota-chan, who was caught in the crossfire, Mashiro-chan and a certain Chuyunibu manga artist who were having a fierce eye exchange, complained helplessly, "And, I'm not a commodity. Not even a toy." Tisk, stingy. Takahashi Makoto smacked his lips in dissatisfaction, and then, and then continued to draw the comics with his head down. "I won, Sarada," Mashiro said in a calm tone, and then, like a certain Chuyunabaku manga artist, she continued to draw the comics. Successfully provided Mashiro and a certain Chuyunabaku manga artist with a sense of pleasure. From this point of view, Sarada is a very remarkable existence. Terrible. It's really terrible. The combination of a natural fool and a Chuyunabaku partner, the degree of terror is rising geometrically. Uncle Ding Ding, who silently watched the whole process of Sarada's misery, tried his best to maintain a posture of "I was drawing comics seriously and didn't see anything," but in his heart, he quietly raised Mashiro's disaster level to dragon level. By the way, in Uncle Ding Ding's mind, the disaster level of a certain Chuyunabaku manga artist, is super god level. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 614. Takahashi Makoto, who has been working hard to complete the manga manuscript recently, today is very rare. As usual, he is bowing his head at the desk and holding a pen to his assistant, Uncle Tintin and Mashiro Girl, showing the so-called true unparalleled in the comics world paintings skills, but sitting on the sofa opposite an uncle who suddenly came to visit. "Tisk tisk tisk, Jingzong Hao Jisang, you have bloodshot eyes, thick dark circles, and your whole body is in a state of being completely hollowed out." Regardless of whether the person you are talking to is a magazine reporter. The editor in charge is either a four-eyed fox from an animation agency, or an uncle from a certain inheritor of the power of forgiveness. Sure enough, the pattern at the beginning of a mockery before getting down to business has become a certain it's the standard equipment for middle-level cartoonists. Although seeing your state, I can tell that you really like the plot I provided, but Jingzong Hao Jisang, please be a little more restrained. If you continue to cause hundreds of millions of killings every day, I will be very worried. You're going to kill so many people every night because of overkill before the game is even finished. Hey. Chen, don't think that your metaphor is very obscure. I don't know what you are talking about. I am not one of those ignorant adolescent boys. I have been married and had a wife. Come here. He glanced at the boy who was eavesdropping because he was curious about the conversation between the two. Although he didn't mean anything against the other party, he was worried about the presence of minors. Uncle Jingzong Hao also used comparison. A vague statement. Should we say that people who are already old and still hold middle school thoughts are all tsunderies with a venomous tongue and a warm heart? And now I still live with my little princess. Apart from working, I basically spend every day with my little princess. How can I have time to do that kind of thing? Objection. By the way, Jingzong Hao Jisang, don't put on a look of disgust. Compared with teenagers who are dominated by curiosity and the unknown and yearn for that kind of thing, I always think that people who have had that kind of experience, on the contrary, you will know the taste because you have tried it, and it will be easier to get addicted to it. Makoto Takahashi put on an expression of "I have studied this matter quite a lot," staring at Uncle Jingzong Hao with a wry smile on his face, and poked him without restraint. He smiled at the other person's pain points and said, "And Jisang, because you are the inheritor of the power of forgiveness, you must have been very depressed during this period. It is precisely because of this that I will put that I'll leave the plot to you in advance." Hey. Then should I say now, "Thank you, Mr. Phoenix Academy Kumamoto, for your great kindness. I will definitely keep this kindness in my heart. Every time I talk to a certain middle-grade cartoonist, I think that unbearable past will always be used as a weapon by the opponent, and then cause outstanding damage to himself. Therefore, it is natural for Jingzong Hao Jisang's tone to become a little unhappy. Humph, if you want to fight, I may not lose to you, so, let's talk about business first." "Oh, you may not lose to me if you fight, Jisang. Who gave you the courage to say such confident words?" "Liang Jingru. And I remember the last person who said this. It seems that I fell in love with a lonely star, and then spent my whole life alone. Tisk, 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 as expected, Jisang, you can become the successor of the power of forgiveness, not by chance, but by Steins Gate. It's your choice. Looking at Uncle Jingzonghao, whose face was getting uglier and gloomier, Takahashi Makoto felt very pleasure, and then turned to the side of the young boy who was preparing to evacuate because he felt that the conversation was getting more and more dangerous. He waved gently and said, "Intern assistant Chorecat number 2 who is quietly eavesdropping over there, come over and join in the discussion." "Hey, Cheng." Seeing Takahashi Cheng dragging the unrelated passerby Sarada into the discussion, Uncle Jingzonghao couldn't help but frown slightly. If I remember correctly, this Sarada boy seems to be underage. Well, although there are no regulations that do not allow minors to participate in the production of games, Cheng, what we want to discuss is related to Song of Saya. The plot of the game Saya Song is filled with a lot of blood and elements of the 18th Forbidden Period, so whether as a game tester or a game creator, it is wrong to allow minors to access 18 banned games. This is the implication of Uncle Jingzonghao. Jisun, although you haven't said it yet, I have roughly guessed the reason for your visit this time. Takahashi Makoto squinted his eyes, and after looking up and down the Sarada boy's body, he said calmly, "So let's change the mode of discussion, skip the parts of the game plot itself that cannot be discussed, and directly choose to talk about our feelings through the different endings of the game. Bypassing some unspeakable plots in the game, directly tell Sarada boy how he feels, and then let the other party judge whether it is feasible. I think I roughly understand what you mean." Although he understood Takahashi Makoto's intention, the new doubts also followed. But Aiken, why did he do it to this extent? As a mortal, Sarada boy lives in Sakurasu, but he is surrounded by a group of genius-level roommates. Even the person he is dating now is a world-class genius painter. Under the astonished gaze of Sarada boy, Gao Qiaocheng told Uncle Jingzonghao all about Sarada boy's life and past, as well as his inner confusion and uneasiness in a very calm tone. This is basically the situation. In order to make people who are about to transfer to Game Planner a professional young man wants to see the level of a real gaming professional, that's why I made such a request. Uncle, thank you. The boy Sarada, who had been teased, taught, by a certain second-grade cartoonist in various ways during this period, his original dissatisfaction was instantly wiped away. Of course, I just think it's more interesting this way. After accepting Sarada boy's thanks as a matter of course, Takahashi Makoto pretended to be Tsundere and acted duplicity, and then immediately exposed his demonic nature. Such evil and evil taste. And I will record the entire performance of Sarada show today and store it in my memory palace as material for future creation. After all, Demon God Phoenix Academy Jujhen has always followed the principle of equivalent exchange, but I will never do any holy act of helping others for free. The boy Kong Tai was silent for a moment. Can you take back my gratitude just now and say MMP or calcium oxide instead? Young man, in this world, especially around this kind of devil, it's hard for a simple existence like you to survive. Uncle Jingzonghao, who was trying his best to hold back his smile and his whole face became distorted, he patted the boy Sarada on the shoulder vigorously. Are you determined to become a game planner? It is indeed a great ideal, young man. This is how people should have ideals, just in case in the future. If I see a ghost in the future, I can tell the other person openly that I have never regretted living in this world. Makoto Takahashi decisively turned the chicken soup prepared by Uncle Jingzonghao into poisonous chicken soup. Enough chatting, then let's get started. White coat, I want to participate too. The white girl who had just finished eating 5 bonkachin cakes naturally sat down next to Sarada boy and intervened forcefully. Tisk, is this the secret of the couple's combo skill? True husband sings and wife kills. Uncle Jingzonghao, who was being treated like shit, muttered dissatisfiedly, but did not refuse the Genbei girl's request and began to tell the story. The 3 endings of the game Saya's Song. Although he avoided part of the plot of the game itself, Under Uncle Jing Zhonghao's methodical narration, the boy Saruto still roughly understood the settings of the game itself. Uncle Jing Zhonghao deserves to be praised as a brilliant game planner. Or should we praise Sarada boy for being worthy of wanting to be a game planner? As for the Mashiro girl, she seems to be still immersed in the aftertaste of Bonkachan, right? I want to ask. Sarada boy pondered for a moment, then looked at Makoto Takahashi hesitantly, and then stammered and asked, why is this game so different when it is said, there is no happy end option? No matter what choice is made, won't Saya be unable to meet her lover in the end? This ending setting will easily make players feel depressed and heartbroken, right? You are able to notice this. You are indeed very good, Mr. Kongtai. Although he said the words of praise, Uncle Jing Zhonghao shook his head slightly and sighed silently in his heart. But, still too young. After all, some of the settings in this game, all determine that this game is a novelty-oriented rather than an orthodox game. It's because of love. After such an answer suddenly appeared in her mouth, the girl Mashiro stared at Makoto Takahashi intently. The style feels somewhat similar to the manga we are drawing. Listening to the sudden speech of the real white girl, Uncle Jing Zhonghao tried his best to maintain a calm expression on his face, but his heart was already shattered, because the real white girl just said it directly by listening to the feelings she said. I came to the conclusion that I had to think about for several days. Is this, the feeling ability of a world-class genius painter? Love, Sarada said that he couldn't understand it at all, and the corners of his mouth kept twitching. Then, that kind of ending, it has nothing to do with love, right? Young Sarada boy, you know absolutely nothing about love. Ah no, it must be too narrow-minded. Makoto Takahashi noticed the flash of loss and dejection in the eyes of boy Sarada. It was rare that he did not make insults, but instead comforted the young man who was hit hard. This scene and this method of persuasion. Regarding Takahashi Makoto's comfort, Sarada boy felt that he had seen the scene at this moment before. The understanding of love is still limited to a narrow scope, because you are still young, Kongtai, and your experience is not broad enough. Why do I have a strong sense of déjà vu? The young boy was trying to remember. When you enter society in the future, experience the baptism and tempering of human intrigues, and struggle in desperate dilemmas, you will find the feeling of pleasure from the so-called love. I understand. Only after experiencing true pleasure can you understand true love. Eh? Aren't these, the words you said when you persuaded Mr. Hiromaru? Sarada finally recalled how a certain Chuyunibu cartoonist led another cartoonist astray, but the difference is that Sarada was a bystander. And this time, he became the one being persuaded. After this chapter was released, the number of words in this book exceeded 2 million. Originally, a cat was going to use this as the title, but after thinking about it, I decided to forget it. This is a book written out of interest by a cat. It will be exactly 3 years tomorrow. Thank you all readers for your continued support. Thank you all readers for your tolerance of my willfulness and various interruptions and water injections. I will conduct a deep self-criticism, and then continue to write out of interest, write what I want to write, and what can please myself. Of course, if you adults will also feel happy about this, it would be great. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 615. Compared to Makoto Takahashi, who has basically been in hiding for the past 3 months, others on the manga side are still working hard to contribute to the great cause of manga serialization, although it sounds more lofty. And it's quite down to earth, but the cartoonists involved don't think so. Since the completion of the comic One Punch Man, Eiji Niitsuma's comic Hero Academia has stirred up the mainstay of hero comics, although it has not been as frantic as before to firmly hold on to the first place and achieve the goal of fighting the heroes alone as super achievement. but it still takes away one of the top 3 positions in weekly comics rankings every time. Although in the eyes of readers and editors, the struggle between the cartoonists on the cartoonist side is inextricable, but the other cartoonists on the cartoonist side who are involved know that this kind of evenly matched scene is simply a merger. It's just an idea that comes from both self-deception and self-comfort. Only by relying on the occasional sudden plot explosion, and the popularity accumulated through it, can he temporarily compete with the manga Hero Academia, and can barely suppress the new wife AG, but if the manga Hero Academia also enters the plot, it will also explode. At that time, it is no exaggeration to say that several comics serialized at the same time were completely irresistible. Although readers have different preferences for plot explosions, some readers like passionate fights with fists and fists, some readers like mortal counterattacks, and some readers like the rhythmic routine of pretending to be a pig and eating a tiger, but for a comic, in addition to the plot, the quality of the comic drawings can also affect the readers. And Eiji Niizuma, who was dubbed a genius by the editor of the weekly magazine, naturally has a better grasp of the quality of manga manuscripts than the other cartoonists. Although Aiken Mumenji's good friend has made rapid progress in recent years and has a tendency to gradually catch up with the new wife AG, but please don't forget that the classmate Landai who is in charge of painting is quite useless compared to the new wife AG. Less time. After all, Arizuma AG had few friends when he was a child, so he stayed at home and painted almost throughout his childhood. Not only does he have an enviable talent for painting, but he also devoted his entire childhood to painting, which he loves most in his life. If a guy with talent and perseverance like Eiji Niizuma hadn't achieved what he has achieved today, maybe he would have been the best. Something questionable. The duo of gay friends Ajumu have been working hard to pursue their new wife AG, especially after the serialization of Soul of the Chess, a heart and soul work that incorporates the past life experiences of the good gay friends, after realizing that the relationship with them has been shortened. After the gap between the new wife and AG, the fighting spirit of the two good friends Ajumu was completely ignited. So, the only comic Hero Academia that can be entangled in weekly magazines today is of course the only comic Ghost of the Game. By the way, because of the instigation of a certain middle school cartoonist, the little sea otter finally opened up a new world. No, it should have embarked on the path of finding pleasure. In just 3 months of serialization, perhaps due to the influence of the will of the universe, or perhaps because he finally understood the true meaning of pleasure, the little sea otter seems to have awakened a great interest. Whenever the comic hunter when a wonderful plot is serialized, the little sea otter will give poor excuses such as poor physical condition or need to go out to get inspiration, etc., and then gnash his teeth at the editor-in-chief of the weekly magazine, Yoshida, and make countless earnest wishes. Under the curse of resentment from the expectant readers, it has entered into irregular publication break mode. As for whether Little Sea Otter went to play mahjong or something during the hiatus of the Comic Hunter, the details are unknown. The Weekly Shounen Jump is a magazine that is published once a week, and the Little Sea Otter that is serialized in the weekly has actually achieved the legendary achievement of only 7 episodes were serialized in 3 months, so now, the Little Sea Otter being called Hiramaru Old Thief by readers in a kind and enthusiastic way, he is indeed the choice of Steins Gate. As usual, although they have completed the important life task of starting a family and starting a business, at the moment, the two members of Ajumu are enjoying their own gay friend time in the manga studio, no. Discussing a major plot in the follow-up to the comic Chess Soul. Speaking of the plot in the comic Chess Soul that impressed readers the most, it was neither Xiao Guang's 2 counterattacks and murders against Xiao Yang with the assistance of the plug-in Chess Soul Xiao Ei, nor was it Xiao Guang's only the ability to replay the game after watching it once was amazing when awakening, not to mention Xiao Guang's rapid progress and defeating opponents who once had to look up to. But Zhou Wei's disappearance. Although the origin of the comic Go Soul is because Xiao Guang met Zhou Wei, a ghost who is obsessed with Go, this does not mean that after Zhou Wei disappears, the entire comic will come to an end, because Zoe has a deep understanding of Go. The obsession, the continuation of the story, and the continuation of the dream, everything has been passed down to Xiao Guang. Therefore, regarding this part of the plot about Zoe's disappearance, the two good friends Ake and Mumenha have reached a consensus a long time ago, so I have to regretfully say something about the rivalry between the comic author and the comic artist. The battle is probably impossible to see. Now, the two good friends Ake and Mumenjai are entangled or arguing about two other things, or it can be said to be one thing. Hey, Akito, even though you repeatedly emphasized that you can try your best to convince Cheng to agree. After listening to his best friend's strange explanation, Lan Dai hesitated for a moment and asked hesitantly, but if we do this, won't it be bad? A real man with big breasts, the yellow-haired man with glasses pushed his glasses and put on a confident expression of I'm in charge of everything. Hey, Supreme, the reason why I put forward this idea is naturally that I have the confidence to convince Cheng. Confidence is the essence of Kawaguchi Ryu cartoonists. No, Akito, that's not what I want to say. Regarding his best friend's overly optimistic attitude, Lan Dai was much calmer. I'm worried that if we cheat Cheng in this way, in the future will he suffer even more tragic revenge. No, it's okay. The man with yellow hair and glasses recalled the past of a certain middle school cartoonist, and said in a bluffing manner, Aiken is not a person who cares about every little thing. Well, probably. Really? But what happened to your silence before? And Akito? Lan Dai looked at his good friend with contempt, and then handed him a tissue. Wipe the cold sweat on your forehead first. No, never mind. I decided to use that plot. The man with yellow hair and glasses suddenly made a decision with an excited look on his face and decided to commit suicide. Was he angry because his good friend had exposed his secrets, or was he controlled by fear and lost his mind? And, aren't you very impressed with the plot I designed? Yes, 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 let's use the plot provided by Ah Cheng. Seeing his good friend who was so strong just now suddenly become extremely guilty, Lan Dai sighed silently and stopped arguing with his good friend. Instead, he asked another question that was comparable to a taboo. Then the question now is, who will contact Ah Cheng? This kind of thing, of course it's up to you, the man with yellow glasses pushed his glasses and gave a very reasonable reason without thinking. After all, I remember Ah Cheng, seems to be your childhood friend, right? Yada. I refuse. Lan Dai decisively rejected his best friend's proposal that would kill him. It is precisely because Ah Cheng and I are childhood friends that I am even more reluctant to persuade Ah Cheng. I don't want to be the protagonist of a comic again because of this matter, and have some of my shameful past serialized in the weekly magazine. That's basically a public execution. Sure enough, the comic Dream Eater is an unforgettable black history for Lan Dai. But I don't dare, ahem. Under the strange gaze of his best friend, the yellow-haired glasses man pondered for a moment, put his phone on the table, and with a determined look on his face, he put the phone on the table and suggested to his best friend while making a call, how about, let's talk about it together. Ah, I have seen our unfortunate future. Speaking of Lan Dai, classmate, don't be so sad. Who is it? Who disturbed His Majesty Feng Guangai Yuan Xiongzhen who was getting pleasure? What you have committed is an unforgivable sin. Gao Chiao Cheng on the other end of the phone suddenly paused for a moment, and then laughed sinisterly. He, it turned out to be the ordinary friends, Yachen Mu Menjai and you. Now you have 3 seconds to pray or leave a last word. That, Ah Cheng, stop making trouble, we. After the yellow-haired glasses man and Lan Dai looked at each other, they nodded at the same time, activated the skill of true unparalleled gay friends, and made a request in unison. I need your consent. Question, is this your lifelong request? Takahashi Makoto hesitated for a moment, as if he was shocked by the power of friends between good friends, and then told the two good friends the process of the transaction according to the principle of equivalent exchange. If so, you will naturally have to pay the same price as the request. So, are you prepared to make a deal with the Demon King? A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 616. Although a certain second-grade cartoonist repeatedly emphasized the principle of equivalent exchange and kept hinting to his good friends Aiken moments such as those who trade with the devil will not end well, but after listening to Yachin Mumen after the request from Ye, a pair of good friends, Takahashi Makoto didn't even think about it at all, and unexpectedly agreed readily. So after hanging up the phone, the good friends Yachin Mumenjai looked at each other. Speaking of which, Cheng just agreed, it should have been something worth celebrating, but Landai said it was quite untrue. After all, Takahashi Makoto's positive and cooperative attitude is really weird. How should I put it? I feel that all the entanglements we had before, now that I think about it, are completely useless. The man with yellow hair and glasses said he was quite depressed, and his eyes when looking at his good friend became full of guilt. If only earlier. If you know that a certain Chuyuni manga will be so cooperative, is there any need to dwell on it for a long time and even be prepared to betray your good gay friend? Could we have heard wrong? After all, in my impression, that guy Aiken is not only full of evil, but also has a bad taste that can be called a ghost beast. It's not that he has delusions of being persecuted. It's not like he suddenly awakened the attribute of divine feelings. A certain painter who has matured a lot since marrying his voice actor's sister, his way of thinking has gradually lost the radicalness and energy unique to teenagers, and has begun to have the characteristics unique to adults. Concerned thinking. Imagine it carefully. I always feel that Aiken, who agreed to cooperate with us so easily, is secretly planning something famous. I suddenly have an ominous premonition. How about, let's confirm with Cheng again. The yellow-haired glasses man pushed up his glasses and proposed to his good friend. No, this is more than just a suggestion, right? Mr. Huangmao glasses, the word calling on your mobile phone is displayed. The reason why you ask a good friend is not to ask for advice, but just to inform the other party. Oh, I feel extremely heartbroken. Makoto Takahashi received the second call from his good gay friend Yachin Mumenjai, and after listening to the explanations of two suspicious gay friends who seemed to be suffering from persecution delusion, finally, he sighed in a very helpless and melancholy tone. Do you just not believe me? Do you think I am such a crazy existence in your eyes? What about the trust between people? Cheng, I'm sorry. Yachin Mumenjai's good friends looked at each other. Maybe an honest apology at this time is the best choice. Makoto Takahashi launched his special move True Heart, killing 3 questions against his good friend Yachin Mumenjai. Visual inspection, the effect was outstanding. There is no 360-degree backflip earth-turning seat, there is no breaking clothes and committing seppuku at the slightest disagreement, and there is no fallen angel maid outfit, not even these. Makoto Takahashi on the other side of the phone, a sincere apology from a good gay friend group. Of course, I did not choose to forgive. Yachin Mumenjai is a good gay group. Your apology seems to me to be completely without sincerity. Hey, Makoto Takahashi, what the hell are you talking about? It has nothing to do with whether the apology is sincere or not. Although Ajo and Mumenjai wanted to complain like this at the moment, but considering the possible price to pay, that is, after being crazily tortured by a second-level cartoonist with extraordinary force value, the two of them still very wisely adopted cover their mouths. This artificial sealing method is used to suppress the true power of vomiting in the body that is about to go berserk. But since you have provided me with some new ways to play, I will forgive you mercifully this time. Makoto Takahashi suddenly changed the subject and let out a joyful laugh on the other side of the phone. And as a friendly reminder, Aiken Mumenjai, I will remind you again, recall the fear of being publicly executed with all kinds of humiliation when you were regarded as the protagonist. After finishing speaking, Takahashi Makoto decisively cut off the call, leaving Ajo Mumenha in silence feeling annoyed. Hey, Chiren, This time, we were wrong. For a long time, Lan Dai's classmate smiled bitterly, his eyes full of guilt and regret, and sighed to his good friend. Indeed, Tops, we really did something quite bad and quite excessive this time. The yellow-haired glasses man also had a wry smile on his face that was almost the same as his good friend. Ayoma Menjai is not worried about the revenge of a certain middle-class cartoonist, because this pattern of hurting each other through mutual damage usually only appears among friends. However, Ayoma Menjai had previously, when I made a request to Makoto Takahashi, he did not treat a certain middle-class cartoonist as a friend, but as an object of exchange of interests. We need your help, so we make a request to you, and we will naturally pay the corresponding price. If we don't need to pay the price, we will suspect that you are just perfunctory in agreeing to us. Treat Takahashi Makoto as an object of exchange of interests instead of a friend. That's what Ayoma Menjai thinks, and that's exactly what he did. You need my help, so I promise you that this has nothing to do with profit, even if you will be blamed for it in the future and cursed by readers, because you and I are reading as competitors and writing as partners and colleagues. Treat Ayoma Menjai as a friend instead of an object of exchange of interests. Takahashi Makoto has done this from beginning to end. When I was young, I always thought that the world revolved around me, that the earth would not be able to rotate without itself, and that the universe would explode without itself. Although this statement sounds rebellious, but I have to admit that human beings, when I was young, I always had such thoughts and even did some exaggerated things. Who has never been frivolous in their youth? Although these will become a shameful black history that they don't want to mention in the future, more often than not, when humans remember the past, they will always sigh with envy rather than shyness. However, after experiencing the baptism of society and the experience of the sinister human heart, the way of thinking in youth will gradually be eroded by the chaotic society and the filthy human heart. There will no longer be hatred for no reason, let alone love for no reason. In adulthood, in the human world, everything revolves around the core called interest. That's right, as long as equivalent exchange between interests can be met, the so-called love and hatred can all be subverted. When doing something, there is no need, or even no need to consider the possibility of success. There is only one thing that needs to be considered, whether the interests of everyone involved in this matter can be satisfied. For example, if something is successful and can satisfy the interests of most people, then no matter how difficult it is and how difficult it is, there will always be people driven by interest to continue to provide help and convenience. Otherwise, if the greedy appetite of human beings cannot be satisfied, then even a simple little thing will encounter various obstacles and various unexpected difficulties in the process of completion. First, satisfy the interests of others, then satisfy your own interests, and finally achieve your own goals. Think twice before acting in this order. This is the so-called concerned thinking in the adult world. So, society is so frighteningly simple, and the world is so pure and frightening. Hey, the best, although now we are also popular cartoonists in the weekly Shonen Jump. The yellow-haired glasses man suddenly broke the deadlock, but the strange thing is that I should be happy, but I am not as happy as I am. At the beginning, I was as happy as when I learned that our comics could be serialized. I'm the same way. Lan Dai was curled up on the sofa, his eyes wandering. Maybe this is the price of our success. Tisk, Supreme, your thoughts are just like Cheng. The moment the words came out, the man with yellow-haired glasses realized something was wrong. After all, after what happened just now, everything related to a certain middle-class cartoonist are all so-called taboos. Sure enough, the atmosphere of silence spread again among the good friends. Hey, Chi-Ren, let's wait until the comic Soul of Chess is over, then we can apologize properly to Cheng. The person who broke the silence this time was Lan Dai's classmate. Rather than spend time worrying about these things now, it's better to seriously think about the follow-up plot of Soul of Chess. Huh? Gao Gao, you. Gao Gao is now in a state where he seems to have given up on himself. Can he really draw comics of the same level as before? Looking at the abnormal behavior of his good friend, the man with yellow hair and glasses couldn't help but worry secretly. As friends, as competitors. You may make mistakes in life, you may be confused, but the only thing we can do now is one thing. Know how to make amends after making a mistake, and be able to move on after being confused. That means trying your best to draw the best manga. This is real life. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 617. Aiken, it's not okay for you to keep delaying starting a new serial. Yoshida didn't know how many times he brought up this topic. Every time the new serial was mentioned before, either Makoto Takahashi used all kinds of weird excuses to get rid of it, or a certain second-year manga artist forcibly changed the topic through forced negotiation. However, even if in this way, Yoshida, the editor-in-chief of the weekly, still has no intention of giving up. No matter what difficulties and threats he encounters, he still never forgets to complain to Makoto Takahashi about the new serialization. So, don't underestimate the genuineness and perseverance of the editor-in-chief of the weekly magazine. Tisk, don't say that women don't like impatient men. Even pets like cats and dogs will dislike their owners who talk too much. So, my beloved cat, you are indeed destined to live alone. Takahashi Makoto's answer was still the same as before, let's talk about new series, now is not the time. Now is not the time. Hey, Chang, you have stopped serializing for almost 4 months. And the manga manuscripts you and Mashiro have completed together are enough to continue serializing for at least a month, right? That's true, but I believe you know that once it starts to be serialized in the weekly magazine. Makoto Takahashi casually pulled out a completed manga manuscript and began to explain to Yoshida the current situation, the dilemma. We can't maintain this level, and my familiar cat, are you sure that after a comic is serialized, there will be something like the style of the first few chapters is different from the style of the later chapters? Is this really a serious matter? This. Although Takahashi Makoto actually gave a reasonable explanation this time, Yoshida still felt extremely depressed, because if he was persuaded again, it would mean that the serialization time of the comic would again delay later. That's why I said now is not the time yet. Makoto Takahashi looked at the hesitant and unwilling look on Yoshida's face, and couldn't help but spread his hands. So my beloved cat, you are like most humans, I always like to take detours when doing things, making simple things very complicated. I didn't choose to serialize it at the beginning, just because I started to consider this aspect, but you always need an explanation. Okay, now after I have given a reasonable explanation, you find that you are back to the original situation, that is, the comic cannot be serialized, the result has been determined from the beginning, so why do you need to go around like this? What about a bigger circle? But as the editor-in-chief, I have yet to submit the cartoons of the cartoonist in charge to the serialization meeting. Yoshida's tone was unusually guilty and aggrieved. Then, at least let me know the reason for delaying the new serialization. If you don't believe in doctors, why do you still go to see a doctor when you're sick? If you don't believe in the fairness of the law, then why do you choose to resolve conflicts through the law? My beloved cat, the unique contradiction of human beings, it can be said to be vividly reflected in you. Looking at the helpless Yoshida, Takahashi Makoto had no intention of restraining himself and continued to ridicule unscrupulously, the reason why I have never explained to you before, a nice way to say it is there is a certain order of learning, and there is a specialization in the art, and to put it bluntly, it is difficult to explain it to you based on your wisdom. So, since you have chosen to be my editor-in-chief, since you have chosen to believe in the crazy cartoonist Phoenix Institute Jujhen, then let's carry this trust until the day of death. Ha 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 ha. Okay, I get it, Yoshida finally chose to give up, there is nothing that can be done about it. After all, A certain middle-level cartoonist has come up with the excuse of the relationship of trust between the cartoonist and the responsible editor, which stands on the highest point of morality. If he continues to be entangled, Yoshida will begin to doubt that he has ever life. I see. No wonder some pundits always like to stand on the highest point of morality when discussing certain topics. In this way, not only can it be persuasive for most people to quickly accept it, but more importantly, if someone raises a refutation, or even just an objection, they can directly accuse the other party through morality and put the other party directly, pushing it to the level of being anti-human and endangering society. It seems that I will have another way of persuasion killing birds with one stone in the future. Seeing Yoshida's aggrieved look, Takahashi Makoto felt pleasure and at the same time thought thoughtfully. When I say uncle, I'm actually lying to the editor in charge, right? The young boy pointed at a certain completed comic manuscript on the table and whispered to Uncle Tintin, complete a comic manuscript of this level. In fact, it only takes 3 hours at most. If it is completed at this speed, it should be no problem to cope with the number of weekly serials. Although your idea is not wrong, it is actually impossible to do it. Uncle Ding Ding explained very kindly and patiently to the boy Sarada, who didn't know much about the weekly serialization. What you just said is just the time to complete the draft. The plot of the comic needs to be conceived, and the comic draft needs to be composed in advance, which requires the cartoonist to spend time thinking. So don't think that the cartoonist can complete the comic draft quickly, and you can serialize it with confidence. In fact, when the comic really starts serialization, the time required to complete a comic draft will far exceed the time it takes to simply draw the content of one episode, and it is even very likely that you can't keep up with the pace of serialization. Yes, that's right. The look in the boy Sarada's eyes when looking at a certain middle school cartoonist changed. Of course, it was not a strange look, but just pure admiration and worship. It's so difficult to publish weekly. It turns out that uncle is such a great cartoonist. But what I just said is only for ordinary cartoonists. Ah Cheng is an exception. Well, he should be an unconventional existence. Ignoring the stiff expression on the face of the young boy Kong Tai, Uncle Ding Ding spoke to himself. When Ah Cheng completes the comic draft, he usually skips the steps of conceiving the plot and composition, which would have wasted a lot of time, as if the plot and composition of the entire comic had already been completed in his mind, based on my many years of experience as a cartoonist's assistant. Look, Aiken's enchanting talent is just like a cheat. Well, if that's the case, it means that with your ability, even without Mashiro's help, you can complete the comic manuscript alone, and even serialize it in the weekly magazine without any pressure, right? The young boy Kota seemed to feel Takahashi Makoto's malicious gaze, lowered his voice again, and whispered to Uncle Ding Ding, then why is the uncle still reluctant to hand the comic manuscript to the editor-in-chief and let the comic start serialization in the weekly magazine? Could it be that the uncle has no confidence in passing the serialization meeting? No, with this comic, with the level and style of the paintings, it is not difficult to pass the serialization meeting. After Uncle Ding Ding's eyes wandered back and forth between Takahashi Makoto and Yoshida for a while, he seemed to notice something, and the corners of his mouth twitched. After hesitating for a moment, he whispered to the young boy Sarada, I guess the reason why Aiken did this is probably out of personal interest, or just bad taste. Personal interest. Bad taste. For example, let Yoshida-kun run back and forth, for example, let Yoshida-kun beg humbly, etc. Uncle Ding Ding spread his hands helplessly, like this, the corners of his mouth. The young Sarada, who also began to twitch, said, if I'm not mistaken, the reason why Makoto is reluctant to serialize is largely because of this. Just as the assistant Ding Ding uncle and in turn assistant cat number 2 Sarada boy privately speculated, the reason why Makoto Takahashi is reluctant to choose serialization is not only because of his excessive pursuit of the quality of the comic manuscript, which delays the completion time, but more importantly, it is because Yoshida's attitude every time he begs, and his tangled look when he is confused by various excuses, will make a certain middle school cartoonist feel extremely happy. To some extent. In order to obtain the feeling called pleasure, Makoto Takahashi is really working hard. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 618. Chapter 618 The real reason for delaying the serialization and the test. For cartoonists, when discussing matters related to cartoon animation, they usually make an appointment with people from the animation company in the cartoonist studio. If you want to get the rights to adapt a comic from a cartoonist, visiting in person is said to be more sincere, and it will also be easier to get it. So all the time, when animation companies decide to animate a certain comic, usually they will send out capable people, and even the president will personally visit the cartoonist. Of course, for cartoonists who stay at home and draw cartoons all year round, they have the famous home field advantage of having dirty, cartoon animation negotiations with animation companies in a familiar working environment. Bonus is naturally the best choice. Therefore, the coffee shop is actually not a suitable place to discuss the animation of comics. At least according to Chen Ben of the animation company Dehesha, the soothing atmosphere created by the gentle music in the coffee shop, although it is easy to overcome the defense line built in the other party's heart, in such an environment, it is also difficult to let the other party make a firm and decisive decision. More importantly, this environment is not suitable at all for talking about something that should be kept confidential. However, despite a lot of dissatisfaction and resentment in his heart, Chen Ben, who is now sitting in the coffee shop, has a faint smile on his face. From time to time, he lifts the coffee on the table and takes a sip, expressing his gratitude to those who have never seen the scene before. A young waitress who unscrupulously exudes the enigmatic charm of a successful middle-aged uncle. Oh, you actually asked me to meet in the coffee shop. After rejecting the overly attentive waiter again, Chen Ben raised his hand and looked at the time, and complained in a low voice with some helplessness, "Don't say it yet. It's already past the agreed meeting time. According to the information I collected, that guy doesn't seem to be able to enter this kind of regular coffee shop, right? So, Four-Eyed Fox, do you want to change the agreed meeting place to a maid cafe or something like that?" Just when Chen Ben was complaining, he suddenly sneered with contempt from behind. "Task tisk 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 tisk. It really shows that those who are serious are actually full of evil. The world is really filthy. You're late. According to common sense, you will always feel embarrassed when you are caught talking about others behind their backs." However, Chen Ben has no such awareness at all. As expected, in today's society, it is also only those who have abandoned their integrity can achieve some success. Although I really want to ask you why you are late, and how you managed to sneak into the coffee shop that you are prohibited from entering, but before that, with the way you are dressed now, I will call you Phoenix Academy teacher, or Gao. Where is Mr. Chiao Chang? Or should I call you father as a believer? It's me. We've arrived at the designated place, and we haven't found any ambush from the opponent's minions yet. Makoto Takahashi did not discuss his attire with Chen Ben, but looked around vigilantly. While keeping the call low, he said, "But we can't rule out the possibility of the other party being trapped by default. So, understand, if I still don't show up at the agreed place when I arrive at the appointed time, please help me. I say hello to that witch, I have always loved her. El Saikongru." Is the call over? Chen Ben, who never complained after watching Makoto Takahashi put the phone in his pocket, narrowed his eyes and said methodically, "Then can we talk about business now, father?" "Well, it seems that you, Four-Eyed Fox, have not been lazy during this time, but have studied it carefully." Makoto Takahashi was not surprised by Chen Ben's title. In other words, If Chenben didn't notice him, maybe Takahashi Makoto would be surprised by today's outfit. Since you have shown your sincerity, you can naturally start to say. Although they were talking in relatively relaxed words and the tone of the conversation sounded very harmonious, the atmosphere created during the brief conversation between Takahashi Makoto and Chenben seemed a bit intimidating. The most obvious evidence is, the little waitress who was very affectionate to Chenben just now, after serving the coffee ordered by Takahashi Makoto, immediately left at the speed of escape from the dangerous place. Even the previous words such as looking back. Frequently that can increase the favorability. I don't even dare to use my skills on Chenben anymore. Speaking of the four-eyed fox, it's been almost 4 months, according to your standards, at least the content of the first episode should have been completed, right? Makoto Takahashi tapped the table rhythmically. You know, my familiar cat, in the past period, has been urging me almost every 3 days, in order to achieve the strategic plan of synchronization and collaboration. I have delayed the time of the new serialization again and again. The content of the first 3 chapters has been completed. After Chenben adjusted his sitting posture, he crossed his hands to his mouth and said with a helpless smile, but as I said before, it has not been through comics, or if the game is promoted in advance and the animation is broadcast directly, we will have to bear a lot of risks. Takahashi Makoto gave up his usual white coat today and put on the same outfit as a certain Maipo priest. Although this outfit also attracted strange looks from the waitress of the cafe, after seeing that the other party was not the legendary white one-eyed dragon who was banned from entering all normal cafes, the waitress of the cafe still let him go in with hesitation and suspicion. And the reason why Takahashi Makoto changed into this outfit was not a sudden whim, it was just to test Chenben. If Chenben couldn't even recognize Takahashi Makoto's outfit, it means that Chenben, who was responsible for animating the comics, did not study it seriously, and didn't even look at the comics provided by a certain Chuyuni cartoonist. Although from the perspective of trust, this is Chenben, and even the Great River Society, trusting a certain Chuyuni cartoonist very much, but from the perspective of reason and reality, blind trust due to past achievements is extremely unqualified, whether as a teammate or as a partner. Chenben, who was able to turn the Okasha, which did not belong to him, into a company that is almost his own in just a few years, is naturally not an incompetent person. Naturally, he can also detect the other party's intention to test through the unusual attire of a certain Chuyuni cartoonist. Therefore, he intentionally revealed the progress of the animation production and spoke frankly about the risks he took. While Takahashi Makoto was testing Chenben, Chenben was also testing Takahashi Makoto. If the cartoonist himself has no confidence in his comics after animation, or even doubts it, then such a collaborator is also unqualified. If you don't even believe in yourself, do you still expect others to believe in you? But even so, haven't you already completed the content of the 3 episodes? Takahashi Makoto shook his head disdainfully. Although it has not been confirmed and there is no way to analyze it, I do have the ability of mind reading, so, four-eyed fox, put away the fake bitter smile on your face. Ah, I've been seen through. Chenben spread his hands with a nonchalant look on his face. It seems that relying on those idiots who only know money, is really not possible. Humph, this kind of inferior temptation, let's stop here. Well, this is also a courtesy, father. Chenben pushed his glasses, stared at Takahashi Makoto through the lenses, and deliberately increased the volume of a certain title. Tisk, he is indeed a scheming evil cartoonist. Tisk, he is indeed a cunning four-eyed fox. At this moment, a certain middle school cartoonist and a four-eyed fox from a certain animation company who were testing each other had almost the same feelings. Tisk, 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 a certain cat has been tortured by various learning experiences and self-examination reports recently. I have wanted to add words such as universe, infinity, and cause and effect when writing those things many times. The mind of a certain cat has indeed been severely damaged. Covering face. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao SD email. Chapter 619. During the period when Makoto Takahashi and Ben Chen frequently met to discuss matters related to the animation of a certain comic, a comic in the Weekly Shonen Jump finally ushered in a plot that readers could not accept in a short period of time and was also quite tearful. That is the core soul character in the comic Hikaru no Go, the obsessive soul who guided Xiaoguang on the road of Go, Sai, disappeared in the latest serialized content. Although Yashiro Mumanji borrowed some things from a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, and deliberately arranged two top Go players from different eras, Sai and Toya, in the comics, to complete a rival match using online Go as a foreshadowing, not only allowing Sai to see the god's move that has maintained his obsession for 1,000 years, but also specifically pointed out the talent of the spectator Xiaoguang in Go. After Sai completed the game with Toya, he expressed an urgent tone of hope that Xiaoguang could play against more Go masters, and expressed regret from time to time, all of which hinted to the readers that this player, who even offered his soul in pursuit of a higher level of Go, is estimated to have little time left. At the beginning, many readers had a vague feeling of uneasiness after seeing the content of these few episodes, but as a character with extremely high popularity and status in the comics, before the plot of the comics was actually serialized, readers would hold the idea known as lucky, hoping that the uneasy prediction in their hearts was wrong. So, after the episode in which Sai disappeared was serialized, the readers who had hoped for luck found that their worst premonition had come true and the thing they were most worried about had happened. So, the weekly editorial department once again enjoyed the long-lost phone storm baptism. I can already foresee that in the next period of time, the ranking of Ashiro Mumha's manga Hikaru no Go will drop significantly. After hanging up the phone with a resentful reader, Ashiro Mumha's editor-in-chief, Uncle Hattori, looked up at his colleagues who were busy appeasing the resentful readers on the other end of the phone, squeezed out a smile awkwardly from his face, and sighed with some worry, "I hope Ashiro Mumha won't be affected too much." Humph. If you are affected by such a trivial matter, then Ashiro Mumha should quit the cartoonist circle as soon as possible. Although Hattori's sigh was very quiet, it was still heard by Yoshida, who had just hung up the phone. This editor-in-chief, who only showed his side in front of a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, whether facing Little Otter or his editorial colleagues, was as sharp-tongued and mean as ever. "Hattori-san, Ashiro Mumha is not a rookie who just debuted. How could she be affected by such a thing? Your current attitude is not so much about worrying too much, but rather about doting on Ashiro Mumha." "Doting? A little, haha. But Yoshida-kun, you should know that when Ashiro Mumha was serializing PCP, she was forced into a desperate situation by an accidental incident at that time and was almost cut off." Editor Hattori was not too optimistic about Yoshida's mocking comfort, although Ashiro Mumha was able to get rid of the influence of various aspects and made a breakthrough in the desperate situation. But what I am worried about now is whether Ashiro Mumha will recall the psychological shadow left by that time because of the serialization. "Hattori-san, Mr. Hattori, after all, you also said that it was the original Aho Mumo. Now Aho Mumo is a popular manga artist in the weekly magazine." Looking at the extremely tangled look of Hattori editor, Yoshida complained unhappily, "According to Aiken's words, since you are a popular manga artist, you naturally have to have the will and determination to match it. How could Aho Mumo be like a newcomer who just debuted, because of a little thing, or even because of readers' comments, and affect the creation of comics?" Although Yoshida's tone did not sound very kind, and it did not sound like a comforting tone at all, but Hattori editor could feel that Yoshida trusted Aho Mumo more than himself, the editor in charge of Aho Mumo. "By the way, is this the legendary Tsundere?" "That's true, haha." On the surface, Hattori editor, who looked relieved, smiled gratefully at Yoshida, but in his heart, he was speculating with such a bad taste. "On the contrary, Hattori-san, compared to Aho Mumha, your ideas are too old-fashioned." "Who is Yoshida?" "But he has been ridiculed and mocked by a certain Chuyuni cartoonist for a long time. How could a mere Hattori editor who knows how to interact with normal cartoonists hide what he is thinking from Yoshida, who has been trained by a certain Chuyuni cartoonist for a long time? As the editor-in-chief of Ahomyumha, you have always treated Ahomyumha as a novice who just debuted, worried, entangled, depressed. You have not noticed Ahomyumha's growth. If you continue in this state, you may be eliminated in the future because you can't keep up with Ahomyumha's pace. Perhaps, as Yoshida said, I have always been eager to see Ahomyumha succeed, but I have gradually ignored their growth. I have always regarded Yachin Mumenjai as a newcomer who has just debuted, as a child who has just learned to walk. I am worried about the bumps they will encounter on the road to growth, and I am entangled in whether they can bear the pressure that cartoonists should bear. Under Yoshida's sarcastic suggestion, editor Hattori also realized his problem. Indeed, Ajumumenha has gradually become a popular cartoonist in weekly magazines from a newcomer. As the editor-in-chief, Hattori has witnessed the whole process of Ajumumenha's growth and has written for Ajumumenha. Happy to achieve success, sad for Ajumumenha's failure. For Ajumumenha, editor Hattori is more like a parent than a responsible editor. After all, isn't it a unique performance of being a witness, or a parent, to worry about your own children's gains and losses? Yes, compared to Yoshida-kun, I lack some training. Haha. Editor Hattori, who had a changed mentality, was in a good mood and did not forget to repay Yoshida's ridiculous persuasion before. What a great kindness. After all, Ajumumenha, who I am responsible for, is not like Mr. Kumamoto of the Phoenix Institute, who can appear in every popular comic series that makes readers love and hate plots. Haha. Bang, recalling the disaster that a certain second-grade cartoonist once brought to the editors of weekly magazines, a certain editor with a vicious tongue couldn't find the right words to refute for a moment, so he could only express his disdain bitterly. The sound of cursing. Don't worry about it, Yoshida-kun. Hattori-san is right. Ever since the serialization of Phoenix in Kuma-sensei, our editorial department has been quite lively. It was rare to see Yoshida looking depressed and deflated. Yujiro originally wanted to join in the conversation. By the way, I used the skill of adding insult to injury, but after seeing the wall clock on the wall, my face suddenly changed, and I quickly started to pack my handbag. At the same time, I wrote complaining and pronounced showing off to my two colleagues in a tone of voice. She sighed, "Oh my, it's already this time. Shinzuma-kun is going to participate in a TV talk show later. I'm obviously just an editor, but why do I feel like Shinzuma-kun's nanny? Oh, let's go first. I'm born to be a hard worker." Yoshida responded silently, but in his heart he had already begun to beat Yujiro. Haha. Hattori laughed kindly, and he also started to whip Yujiro in his heart. "Hey, Yoshida-kun, let's let Yujiro treat us tonight." After watching Yujiro leave, editor Hattori smiled sadly. After all, I'm accompanying a cartoonist on a talk show and on TV, it's really gratifying. Congratulations. Yeah, that's right. This kind of thing must be celebrated. Yoshida squinted his eyes to organize the documents in his hands, and at the same time kindly suggested to Hattori editor, and it would be too selfish for only the two of us to participate. Right? How about calling Aiken, Hamaru, and Ajumumenha? Second. I will contact Takagi-kun and Mashiro-kun now. Hattori, an action-minded editor, decisively took out his phone and started to contact Kyajo-kun Yumha, a pair of stay-at-home friends. At the same time, on the Yachin Mumenjai side, Landai and Huangmao Glasses looked at each other, and finally reached an agreement and made up their minds to make a certain decision for a certain middle-level cartoonist. A rather tricky and crucial decision. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 620. Chapter 620. Everything is your fault. In cooperation with his fellow editor Hattori, Yoshida led his cartoonists to brutally kill another colleague Yujiro who was showing off in various ways, This made Yoshida very pleasant for a whole week. Whether it was being delayed by a little sea otter or being teased by a middle-class cartoonist, for a whole week, every time he saw Yujiro holding a shriveled wallet and regretting and lamenting bitterly, even if Yoshida was in a bad mood before, no matter how bad it is, it will instantly become pleasant. For an office worker, especially an editor who can fall into a state of pleasure at any time, a week passes quickly, but for readers who are waiting for the comics to be serialized, a week is like a century. So long, in other words, this is the victory of the theory of relativity. So at the end of a week, a certain sinister editor was still trapped in the feeling of pleasure and couldn't extricate himself. After all, according to Yoshida's sinister personality, using the method that Makoto Takahashi usually uses on himself, poking Yujiro's pain from time to time can make his pleasant mood last for a long, long time, although Yoshida's this pleasure is based on the painful memories of my colleague Yujiro. Originally, Yoshida planned and prepared to do this. However, at the beginning of a new week, to be precise, it should be when Yoshida read a certain comic in the latest issue of the weekly Shonen Jump that has gone on sale, the momentary mood called pleasure dissipated. Clean, and then, dominated by an emotion called anger. Hattori-san, what on earth is going on? An angry Yoshida pressed the latest issue of the weekly magazine on the desk of his fellow editor Hattori, pointing at the manga Ghost of the Game that awakened his root of resentment. A new episode of the series was serialized. He stared at his colleague Hattori, who was the alliance last week, and roared, Ajumumenha and the others, are they planning to divert the trouble eastward? Regarding this, I actually told Takagi-kun and Mashiro-kun before, but they insisted on adding this explanation. After hesitating for a moment, Hattori editor spread his hands helplessly and said to Yoshida opened his mouth to explain, furthermore, if we really want to talk about this matter, it has to do with Master Kumamoto of the Phoenix Academy. Yoshida looked at editor Hattori suspiciously, is it related to Cheng? Yes. After all, the plot in the previous chapter of Go Soul was very good. He silently watched the cross-generational competition between two top Go masters. After the game, he also revealed what Zhou Wei had been pursuing for so long. Firsthand, when I received the manga manuscript, I specifically praised the plot design of Ajumumenha, haha. After the editor Hattori let out a habitual laugh, he saw Yoshida's somewhat ugly face. Immediately changing the subject and continuing to explain, then Masashiro-kun told me that this plot idea actually came from the real incident when Mr. Kyumaru of the Phoenix Academy took his children to go to Takagi-kun to play Go. So, according to the characters of Aiken Mumenjai, the wonderful plot of the previous chapter of the comic The Soul of the Game will naturally be attributed to Aiken. After Yoshida pondered for a moment, he said to him in an affirmative tone. Editor Hattori expressed his speculation, that's why I specifically mentioned this matter in the serialization of the comic Ghost of the Game. Well, Yoshida-kun, the situation is basically the same as what you said. But Hattori-san, even though the plot of the previous chapter of the manga The Soul of the Game is very exciting, readers are very resentful about the plot of Saei's disappearance in the manga. Regarding this point, I think it's very clear, right? If Yoshida could barely suppress his anger before and control himself on the verge of going berserk, then now, Yoshida's sanity limiter has been completely opened. So after this chapter was published, readers saw the explanations of the two guys from Aiken Mumenjai, that guy Aiken will definitely become the target of readers' resentment and curse. Although I also think that it is inappropriate for Ajumumenha and the others to do this. Editor Hattori shook his head helplessly again, but it is not only Ajumumenha and the others who insist on doing this. What's more important is that, even Master Jujhen of the Phoenix Academy specifically requested this. Cheng actually agreed. Yoshida was stunned for a moment, with a look of disbelief on his face, and continued to ask his fellow editor Hattori, Hattori-san, could it be that you are reviewing the manga manuscript? When you arrived, you even made a special call to confirm with Aiken, right? It's not me who called Mr. Kuma from the Phoenix Institute, but Mr. Kuma from the Phoenix Institute specifically called me when I was reviewing the manga manuscript. Editor Hattori looked a little unnatural when talking about this matter. Asked Yoshida with some confusion, speaking of Yoshida-kun, Mr. Kuma from the Phoenix Academy, how on earth did he know that I would be reviewing the manga manuscript at Ajumumenha at that time? All the cats and dogs in the city are the spies of that guy Aiken, according to him, but I am more inclined to believe that before telling you this, Aho Mumanjai and the others had reached some kind of agreement with that guy Aiken. After explaining to his colleague, the editor Hattori, Yoshida immediately began to organize his briefcase, complaining about a certain Chuyuni cartoonist. Aiken is really, he didn't even discuss this with me first, tisk, a willful guy, damn it. Speaking of Yoshida-kun. Looking at Yoshida, who was about to go to a certain Chuyuni cartoonist to ask for an explanation, Yujiro, who had been silently reading the weekly magazine next to him, finally couldn't help but say, I think you should read the latest serialization of Mr. Hiramaru first. Eh? Yujiro, is there any problem with Hiramaru-kun's comics? Hearing this, Yoshida paused in his tidying up and picked up the weekly magazine. While saying in confusion, it's rare that Hiramaru-kun submitted a serialized comic manuscript this week. I also carefully reviewed it 3 times. It should be, what the hell is this? Are you sure you have reviewed it carefully, Yoshida-kun? Yujiro showed a look of great sympathy on his face. Well, if I hadn't seen your surprised expression, I would have thought that Hiramaru's narration was deliberately instructed by you. It was because of the help of Mr. Howin-kuma that we figured out how to make Sai disappear naturally. Thank you for the previous hint from Mr. Howin-kuma. This is the words of thanks left by Yashiro Mumenha in the comic Hikaru no Go. Although Yashiro Mumenha was grateful, it is undeniable that this was definitely instructed by a certain Chuyunibu comic. Otherwise, with the personalities of Yashiro Mumenha and his good friends, would they dare to make such hateful remarks in the weekly magazine? It is because of the help of Mr. Howin-kuma that I understand how to find joy and become a qualified cartoonist today. Thank you Mr. Howin-kuma for your previous guidance. This is the message of Xiao Heidao in the comic Hunter. Xiao Heidao's message seems nothing, but think about it, Xiao Heidao has completely become a certain old thief recently, delaying manuscripts and taking a break. Compared with the message of Yachin Mumanjai, Xiao Heidao's message is more sarcastic. Although Xiao Heidao said the truth and expressed his sincere gratitude, once the reader combines the current situation of the comic Hunter serialization, it becomes an extremely excellent and successful misdirecting trouble operation. Combined with the previous situation of Yachin Mumanjai, the reason why Xiao Heidao sent such a message, is also due to the shadow of a certain middle school comic. After all, apart from a certain Chuyunibaku manga artist, Yoshida didn't think there was anyone else who could replace the ones he had reviewed. Yoshida clearly remembered that day, the little otter very abnormally proposed to follow him to find Takahashi Makoto. I see. Flipping through the new issue of the weekly magazine quickly, Yoshida threw the weekly magazine on the table fiercely, and a smile called played to collapse appeared on his face. I understand now, all this was directed by that guy Aiken behind the scenes. Aiken, as expected, everything is your fault. Can a cat say that in order to update, the hand that had been chopped off was reattached? Laughs. Immersed in the shopping spree, I forgot the fact that I was single. When I came to my senses, I found that the wallet and credit card were already dead. What a pity. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do SD Email. Chapter 621. Just when Yoshida was angrily preparing to go to Takahashi Seiki to question him, a certain second-grade cartoonist was engaging in the famous battle of wills with his assistant, Uncle Tintin. This plot, as expected, I still can't accept it. Uncle Ding Ding looked directly at Takahashi Cheng and said in a rare firm tone, although I understand that this is the need of the plot, but Cheng, don't you think you should treat a person like this? Little Lolita, is this really too cruel? Magicians are a group of beings who do whatever it takes to pursue the source. Tintinji-san, since I don't use my identity as a human to bind magicians, it means that magicians cannot use any means measured by human standards. Regarding his assistant Uncle Tintin's doubts, Takahashi Makoto also kept looking at him, but there was no retreat or compromise in his eyes, so even though the magician is wearing a human skin, but neither the inner part nor the soul is human anymore, to accuse magicians of using common sense and emotions that restrict human beings is, in a sense, a childish and stupid idea. Hey, Cheng, what you said, is really weird, isn't it? Uncle Ding Ding twitched the corner of his mouth and complained helplessly, I heard Rina-chan say that before. It is said that there was a little boy in the kindergarten who wanted to invite your Rin-chan to play with him at a parent-child event, but he was threatened by you. After all, as a qualified father, I naturally want to prevent all bugs and garbage from approaching Rin. If I hadn't been restricted by the witch at that time, I would definitely use spiritual skills such as psychological suggestion and hypnosis to teach that little bastard has become a new person again. Even though a long time had passed, Makoto Takahashi still had a look of resentment on his face when he mentioned it, but even so, I will have something in the future. Let Mr. Pavlov and Mr. Schrödinger lead their men to take good care of that kid for about a month. Tisk, if the witch hadn't discovered some clues, I originally planned to take care of this special kid. Care lasts for more than 1 year. I'm talking about Cheng, what do you mean by taking care of? Uncle Ding Ding's tone became a little weak for some reason. Could it be that a stray cat suddenly jumped out to scare the child on his way to school? Or let the occasional stray dog keep barking at it? What, don't you know Tintin-ji-san very well? Makoto Takahashi put on an expression of finding the organization. After staring at Uncle Tintin for a moment, he sighed thoughtfully, that's right too. After all, you also have a daughter. No, I just heard a neighbor's wife remind me that stray cats and dogs have appeared frequently around me recently, so I need to take good care of my children. Uncle Ding Ding stared at him with a look like sure enough, he is the culprit. Looking at Makoto Takahashi, after pondering for a moment, he sighed helplessly, I was still a little hesitant at the time, but now that I think about it, the only person I know who can command cats and dogs is you, Cheng. Of course, Makoto Takahashi nodded and admitted as a matter of course. At the same time, he did not forget to boast about Ding Chun and Li Yulai who had been surrounding him for some time. Cats and dogs are very spiritual, how can they be mere mortals? What about the species that humans can drive? So I don't understand even more. Uncle Tintin suddenly became excited, tapping the comic manuscript spread out on the table with his fingers, and asked Makoto Takahashi in an almost roaring tone, obviously in real life in the manga, Rin-chan is so doting and protective, but why does Rin's sister Sakura suffer so much torture and pain in the manga? Hey, Tintin-ji-san, are you too into the drama? Makoto Takahashi looked at the excited Uncle Tintin and shook his head feebly, I have some ideas about the setting of this plot. It was explained clearly in the previous comics. But Cheng, you... Yes, I already understand what you are thinking, Tintin-ji-san. To Uncle Tintin, who was eager to explain something, Takahashi Cheng waved his hand unceremoniously, as a father, you pushed your daughter into the abyss like a devil's cave with your own hands, and you shouldn't let your daughter endure the pain and torture. What really makes you think about peacekeeping has nothing to do with the identity of the magician, but the fact that you can't accept that I would actually design this. The plot, right? That's right. In reality, you are a guy suffering from severe daughter-in-law. When he mentioned the comic plot he had observed before, Uncle Tintin's mood, which had gradually calmed down, became excited again. But Tokyo-me in the manga doesn't look like a father at all. That's why I said you were too involved in the drama, Tintin Gi-san, Makoto Takahashi used a contemptuous tone and mercilessly interrupted Uncle Tintin's excited roar skill, "I'm so mad. The manga artist Hohoin Kuma is not Tozaka Tokiomi of the source of all mistakes. So according to what you said, Cheng." Uncle Tintin stared at Makoto Takahashi with contempt and helplessness. After a long time, he quietly complained, "Is everything Tokiomi's fault? Obviously you are the one who designed the plot of the manga, but now you are blaming it all on Tosaka Tokiomi in the manga." After hearing Makoto Takahashi's explanation, Uncle Tintin looked at a certain middle-class manga artist with contempt in his eyes. More intense. It's really not easy for you to understand Tintin Gi-san." Makoto Takahashi slowly sorted out the comic manuscript that was a little wrinkled by Uncle Tintin, but he didn't complain at all. Instead he talked about the character of Tokiomi Tozaka in the manga, in terms of his attitude towards Rin. As a magician, Tokiomi has a fatherly attribute that ordinary magicians don't have. But for Sakura, it shows the most cold-blooded and inhumane side of the magician, right? Although Takahashi Makoto has analyzed it in detail, Uncle Tintin said that he is still reason can explain feelings but cannot let go state, and when I see the innocent and cute Rin-chan in the comics, I will think of your daughter, Chang, and then I will think of you who suffers from severe daughter control in reality, and then in comparison after that, you will have a strong sense of peacekeeping towards Tokiomi in the manga. Hey Tintin Gi-san, you have to know that Tokiomi is about to participate in a cruel war for the Holy Grail." Makoto Takahashi tapped a close-up cartoon of Tokiomi with his fingers and talked to Uncle Tintin, "If you bring the loving father attribute into the war, Tokiomi will become a character who will hesitate in the face of killing, so I specially arranged that kind of plot to facilitate Tokiomi to become a villain later. Character, but according to the standards of a magician I told you before, there is nothing wrong with Tokiomi's character. It's just that compared to Rin-chan who fled to another city with her mother, Sakura's experience was too cruel. Because Rin-chan is very cute, and more importantly, since she has the same name as my Rin, she can't suffer misfortune." A certain middle-class cartoonist who doesn't hide his heavy daughter control doesn't care. He spread his hands and said quite selfishly, "However, the development of comic plots requires character conflicts and events that can create conflicts, so Sakura's tragedy was already doomed from the beginning." Uncle Tintin twitched the corner of his mouth. Although Takahashi Makoto's explanation is very reasonable, sometimes reasonable explanations are impossible. Make it acceptable. As a cartoonist who constructs comics, he should naturally be like the God who created the world. He should have compassion for every character, and should be tolerant and accepting of every character's experiences, so instead of lamenting the cruelty brought by fate, it is better to feel it. That gorgeous beauty can only bloom in adversity. Regarding the opinions in fate, they are just the personal feelings of a certain cat. Although there is a suspicion of inflating, I still decided to write it like this. After all, compared to copying a large plot based on comics or animations, you readers are not as good as go read the original story. If any offense is caused, please forgive me. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 622. Soon after Takahashi Makoto finished talking to Uncle Ding Ding beside his assistant, Yoshida, the editor-in-chief of a certain weekly magazine, finally arrived with a lot of anger. "Aiken, why did you instruct Yashiro Mumen and Hamaru-kun to do that? If it were any other time, Yoshida would not dare to question Takahashi Makoto with such an attitude, but today was different. As for the fear of being retaliated by the second-year cartoonists in the future, the furious editor-in-chief said that he could not care about these things at all now. What on earth are you planning? Oh, my cat, you're just in time." Facing Yoshida, who was like Unit -01 going berserk, Uncle Ding Ding, the assistant, and the girl Mashiro and the boy Sarada, who were temporarily staying at Makoto Takahashi's house, all wisely chose the option of stepping back and keeping a distance and watching silently. Makoto Takahashi was not overwhelmed by Yoshida's momentum, but instead showed a happy joyful smile, took out his cell phone from his white coat and waved it at him. Originally, I was planning to use the magic at the end of the magic I summoned you when I was full. I didn't expect you to show up without being summoned. Tisk tisk, you are worthy of being my chosen cat. The editor-in-chief's professionalism is great. Ah Cheng, you are looking for me, wait. Isn't this the right time? Yoshida realized that he was almost successfully diverted by a middle school manga artist. Although he was very curious, he still maintained a gloomy expression on his face, but perhaps even Yoshida didn't realize that his originally angry tone had calmed down a lot at this moment. Ah Cheng, don't play dumb, and don't try to change the subject. I came to you today, I think you should know the reason. I can even say that I have calculated it a long time ago, right? Is it, because of that? Takahashi Makoto tilted his head and pondered for a moment, then a look of realization appeared on his face, and his eyes looking at Yoshida became a little weird. Tisk. My beloved cat, as a man, you should be more honest. You said you wanted, but your body is so humble. Hey, 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 don't look at me with such hatred. I'm not euphemistically saying that you are not good at something that can't be described. I just want to tell you that as a qualified editor in charge, if you want to receive comic manuscripts, just say it directly, and don't be led astray by those arrogant guys in the editorial side of your weekly magazine. So, I'm asking you. Anger, that kind of invisible and ethereal existence, compared to Takahashi Makoto's new serialized comic manuscript, can only be regarded as a passing cloud at best. Wait, Chen, did you just say that you were going to give me the new comic manuscript? Oh, my beloved cat, you came in such a hurry today, didn't you want to get the new comic manuscript from me again? Takahashi Makoto frowned in surprise at Yoshida's suspicious eyes and puzzled questions. By the way, my beloved cat, are you dissatisfied with me and come to find trouble? No. Not at all. Yoshida immediately took out his usual enthusiastic attitude, and said to Takahashi Makoto in a flattering and even somewhat flattering manner, well, Chen, if it's okay, can I see the comic manuscript you have completed? By the way, my dear cat, your request is very strange. Observing the comic manuscript, isn't this your duty as the editor-in-chief? Makoto Takahashi handed the sordid comic manuscript to Yoshida. By the way, my dear cat, you seemed very angry just now, why is that? Wait until I finish reading the comic manuscript first. Yoshida picked up the comic manuscript with a serious face, sat on the sofa and began to observe. After learning that Makoto Takahashi finally agreed to submit a new series and was willing to let him perform the duties of the editor-in-chief to review the comic manuscript, for some actions suspected to be instigated by Makoto Takahashi, Yoshida, who originally wanted to go to the door to ask for punishment, of course chose to forgive a certain middle school cartoonist at this time. So, at this moment on this day, under the watchful eyes of his assistant Uncle Ding Ding and a pair of underage boys and girls, Yoshida, a well-known editor-in-chief of the weekly Shonen Jump, performed an annual drama called For the Comic Manuscript. The so-called moral integrity is nothing but a thing outside the body. If it were any other time, when the assistant, Uncle Ding Ding, and others looked at him with contempt, Yoshida would definitely fight back with his two attributes of black-bellied and poisonous tongue. But today, after only observing 3 pages of the comic, Yoshida was completely captivated by it. He can be called a veritable quiet handsome man. The setting of the other world similar to that of a magician but renamed as a magician can be seen in many comics. So when Yoshida first saw the setting, he thought that Takahashi Makoto had dug out some settings that were gradually outdated, and in his heart he had such disdainful thoughts as I have been looking forward to this for so long. But it turns out to be this. But until the comics began to throw out the settings of Holy Grail war and heroic spirits, Yoshida's face changed. First is the summoning of heroic spirits, According to the setting in the comics, it is to materialize the heroes that appeared in the legends and history of mankind in the past in the form of spirits in reality. However, in the history and even legends of the past and present, the number of heroes praised by humans is as numerous as the Crucian carp crossing the river, and there are countless heroes. Any hero you list has a heroic story that is worth singing and crying. In short, if the life story of each hero is taken as the main plot, it is enough to support a novel or comic. But now, Takahashi Makoto has gathered several heroes who can become the protagonists of comics or novels into one comic, let alone whether the main line will collapse in the future. Just arranging the plot of these heroes is a headache for many cartoonists. But with the intervention of the main plot called Holy Grail War, this is not a problem. The heroes who were once famous and are now summoned as servants, and the magicians who live in the other world as the masters of heroes, have to fight and fight around the Holy Grail miserably. The winner will get everything, and the loser will lose everything. Carefully observing the comic book called Fate in his hand, and carefully turning every page of the comic book manuscript, although on the surface he looked like he was doing a business-like job, Yoshida's heart had already been in turmoil. The 3-chapter comic book manuscript that Makoto Takahashi gave to Yoshida, except for the summoning of the heroic spirit, was mostly used to introduce the background and settings of the comic book, so after Yoshida finished reading the 3-chapter comic book manuscript, his face naturally showed the kind of expression that everyone understands. My cat, as you can see. Unfortunately, before Yoshida could ask a question, Makoto Takahashi directly blocked the other party, pointing at the comic book manuscript and helplessly said, "To complete such a high-quality comic book manuscript, it is impossible to use the skill of Godspeed as before." In other words, the rest hasn't been drawn yet. Although he already knew the answer, Yoshida couldn't help asking, "The so-called self-comforting plug-in and self-suggestion of doing bad things will not necessarily be discovered is talking about people like you, Yoshida-kun." Of course, ignoring Uncle Ding Ding's "I can't bear to watch anymore" and turning his head, Makoto Takahashi, who possesses the skill of world-class fraud, lied to Yoshida as if stating the facts. Tisk, that's a pity. Yoshida did not master the skill of mind reading and did not specifically learn the advanced skill of how to identify lies through micro-expressions, so he naturally believed the lies of a certain middle school cartoonist. Then, Makoto, can the content of the first 3 chapters of the comic be submitted to the serialization meeting? Tisk. Do you still need to ask for instructions for such things? My cat, fight like a man. Makoto Takahashi showed a smile called joy on his face, and said meaningfully, "All of us will support you, cheer you on, and collect your body. If you collect my body in the future, wouldn't it be equivalent to Makoto Takahashi's comic not passing the serialization meeting?" However, Yoshida's doubts were soon replaced by the joy of getting a new comic series. After seeing Takahashi Makoto turn on the crazy cartoonist mode, a certain editor-in-charge chose to leave quietly with self-awareness. Question: Yoshida-kun, didn't you come to Takahashi Makoto to ask for an explanation at the beginning of today? Answer: when a cartoonist submits a new comic series, the editor-in-charge will choose to forgive the cartoonist's previous delays or even suspension of publication, so now that Takahashi Makoto has agreed to submit a new series, of course he will choose to forgive a certain Chuyuni cartoonist. This is the judgment of a qualified editor-in-charge, not the Steins Gate choice that a certain Chuyuni cartoonist often talks about. Well, absolutely not.